dark magic circles, immortal demons, and spooky spiders. One Piece has gotten creepier than ever in recent chapters. With the introduction of Saint J. Garcia Saturn, it seems like the story is taking a more chilling route. We've never seen such a villain with such an evil presence and such terrifying abilities. I never expected Oda to make a villain do something as despicable as holding a little girl and commanding an army to collectively aim and shoot at her. The story is surely taking a very dark turn. Sure, we've had dark and explicit moments in One Piece before, but it was merely sprinkled into the narrative rather than being as explicit and front and center as it is now. It's almost as if Oda intends to take the story in a completely different route now that we are in an endgame and an in-game level boss has arrived. But with all these themes of horror, I can't help but start thinking about a certain undead skeleton, our glorious king of the underworld, Brook, especially considering that the magic summoning circle we saw Saturn use resembles something very similar we've seen with Brook before. See, in chapter 524, during Brook's training storyline, we actually see a group of people summon Brook during a ritual, and we can see a similar 5-star magic circle as we do with Saturn. This bit of foreshadowing makes it all the more clear that Brook's role in the story may now be more important than ever. In fact, the last time Oda has delved so deep into such frightening themes in the story is in Thriller Bark, where we are introduced to Brook for the first time. In fact, the last time this story took such a dark turn was after meeting Brook. Immediately after meeting Brook, we get the Sabaody incident, we get Impelled Down, and we get the Summit War. It's almost as if Brook's introduction and Grim Reaper-like representation in the story was a sign of the grim things to come. But in what capacity will Brook be important in the current saga? It seems as if Oda hasn't highlighted the importance of Brook in a long while, and his character arc and dream are often forgotten. But let me remind you, Brook's overall goal in the story is to meet back up with Laboon, but it's even deeper than that suggests. You see, Brook's determination to see Laboon couldn't even be broken by death itself. Brook's whole character arc is a representation of dreams and desires transcending the natural order of life and death to achieve a worthwhile goal, which is a consistent theme throughout the whole One Piece story. This theme has been especially highlighted in Wano with the concept of the ghost of the 7 scabbards who seemingly come back from the dead to exact their revenge against Orochi. We can also observe this in the overall theme of the inherited will of the D clan coming back to the spirit of the new generation. Brook is an incarnation of all of these themes rolled into one person who actually came back from the dead to fulfill their dreams. But the aspect of Brook's character arc and dream I most want to highlight is the very simplistic yet oxymoronic nature of his existence. Simply put, Brook's most driving desire is to be alive, as he has experienced a less than ideal death. But oxymoronically, Brook is still dead since he has none of the qualities of the people who are alive, such as organs, muscles, or even a brain for all we know. But what he does have is the desire to be alive, which depending on your philosophy on life may be the single most important desire one could have. Now, why is this important to this theory? If you read the title of this video, you may be thinking, wow, another secret devil fruit theory by Middleweight. First, it's Usopp has a mythical Zoan devil fruit. Now it's Brook has a mythical Zoan devil fruit. When is this guy going to stop looking so deep into things and just accept the story at face value? Well guys, I definitely can't start doing that now because the character we were speaking about today is the very opposite of face value. In fact, Brook doesn't even have a face. Okay, but seriously, Brook's whole existence makes no sense. He can move, yet he has no muscular system. He can talk, yet he has no vocal cords. He can think, yet he has no brain. How is he even alive? We've been told that Brook is alive due to his revived fruit, but can a devil fruit like the revived fruit offer all the impossibilities to his biological nature? That's where this theory truly begins. I have a theory that Brook's devil fruit should not be taken at face value. Rather than being a paramecia, I believe that Brook's true devil fruit is a mythical Zoan that allows him to have these impossibilities in his biological nature. And to go even further, I will prove that Brook's devil fruit is the biggest hidden weapon toward defeating Saint J. Garcia Saturn. Now, what do I mean by that? You see, Saturn seems to be immortal. In chapter 1095, we see the results of Bonnie stabbing Saturn, and he seems to be completely unaffected. In fact, the wound even closes and heals almost instantly. In that very same chapter, we get a God Valley flashback where Saturn seems to look the same age as he does now. It's very likely that Saturn is both immortal and invulnerable. So how would the crew hope to even damage him, let alone defeat him? Well, to counter an immortal, you need another immortal. And that's where the importance of Brook's true Devil Fruit comes into play. You see, Brook is immortal and invulnerable to some degree. This idea is not far-fetched, but has been re-emphasized and confirmed in chapter 1077. In that chapter, we can look closely and see that Brook has his head completely outside of his body. Then in the next few panels, he casually puts it back on his body. This made me start thinking, can Brook even die? Then I thought, wait, can Brook even age? Is Brook possibly the first immortal character we've seen in the story? Then it dawned upon me, maybe that the best way to understand how Saturn's immortality can be beaten is to understand how Brook has become seemingly immortal. Brook informed us in chapter 443 that his Devil Fruit gives the user a second chance at life. However, in that same chapter, Sanji questions Brook on how his Devil Fruit truly works. Sanji says, that fruit has already fulfilled its purpose and you still can't swim, right? This question is crucial in grasping the true nature of Brook's Devil Fruit. If Brook's Devil Fruit's sole purpose is to revive someone after their death, it raises the question of its continued relevance after the revival. And if Devil Fruits are meant to undergo a rebirth process for another user, how does the revived fruit escape this rule? Does it suggest that the user of the revived fruit would potentially live forever since the fruit returns to the original user every time? Unless the revival is a one-time occurrence, the fruit's purpose should expire and the user should no longer possess the Devil Fruit after being revived, which is why Sanji implies that Brook should no longer be hindered by the inability to swim, as he would no longer possess the Devil Fruit. The complexity surrounding Brook's Devil Fruit suggests that there may be more to it than we've been told. And if you're concerned if I'm looking too deep into this, remember, this is Oda writing these dialogues into the story. It's clear that he intends to draw attention to the idea that Brook's Devil Fruit is an impossible existence in every way. It completely breaks the rules of Devil Fruit logic, which leads me to conclude that it may be a mythical god Zoan, as I've covered before in my Usopp theory that the only Devil Fruits that can break conventional logic are mythical god Zoans. So my hypothesis is that Brook's revival capabilities is a godly ability stemming from a god who has much more capabilities beyond just revival. This is even more credible once we get to post time skip, where Brook shows that he has much more capabilities than previously established, starting from his ability to conjure ice from the underworld, as well as his ability to literally separate his soul from his body whenever he pleases. These abilities clearly display that there is something more to his powers. So let's focus on his ability to use ice for a second. I think that this ability tells us all that we need to know about the true nature of his Devil Fruit. Something that people often miss when it comes to mythical Zoans is that they are the only Devil Fruits outside of Logia that can conjure and freely manipulate a certain element. We see this with Yamato and her ability to control ice, with Marco and his ability to control a special form of fire, with Kaido and his ability to control fire and lightning. This theme even remains consistent with Luffy's Sun God Fruit, where we can see him freely control lightning. But this detail is especially important when you consider that there are absolutely no paramecia that can freely control and conjure an element. Even when you consider someone like Doflamingo, who can add heat to his strings, but he is not able to freely manipulate that fire. And sure, there seems to be exceptions with someone like Big Mom, who controls elements using her soul fruit, but she doesn't conjure those elements herself. She simply uses her soul powers to give those elements life and control them. We've seen that when Prometheus or Zeus is taken away from her, she cannot freely manipulate or conjure that element they gave her control over. But on the other hand, someone like Brook has free manipulation and conjuring of his ice. We've seen Brook freeze people with his ice, freeze the whole floor, and we've seen him go as far as making a whole wall of ice. We've also seen this consistent with people like Yamato, who can utilize her ice in multiple ways, such as using it as body armor, using it as a shield, and even conjuring it out of her mouth. It is evident that only mythical Zoans can have that level of control of elements that can rival even Logia. This is one of the major reasons why I don't believe Brook's Devil Fruit is truly a paramecia, rather it is a mythical Zoan that can manipulate ice as one of its abilities. But is this enough to prove without a doubt that Brook has a Mythical God Zoan? Well, no, this is merely the groundwork to open your mind to the possibility that Brook's Devil Fruit is not a paramecia, but rather a mythical Zoan. But there is a difference between a typical mythical Zoan and a Mythical God Zoan, which I think more closely matches Brook's Devil Fruit. And my theory is that Brook is a Mythical God Zoan, but how can we tell? What is that distinguishing factor? Well, Mythical God Zoans, as opposed to normal Zoans, have a passive body granted to the user without activating their Devil Fruits. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, often Zoans have to activate their transformations into the animal which their Devil Fruits are modeled after. For example, someone like Lucci has to turn into a leopard to manifest the biology of the leopard. Without activating his leopard fruit, he does not have fur, fangs, and claws. He has a normal human body until he activates it. Same for all Zoans except Mythical God Zoans like Luffy. We now understand that Luffy possesses the mythical Nika God Zoan. However, for most of the story, we believe Luffy's rubber powers were due to him eating a paramecia fruit. But in hindsight, this was inherently nonsensical from the start. Throughout the narrative, there are no paramecia fruits that inherently grant you a passive transformation of your entire body. Even individuals like Diamond Jozu must actively trigger their diamond body. The same principles applies to characters like Pika, who must consciously activate his stone form and aren't passively made of stone. There are no paramecia in the known One Piece verse that are passively made of their Devil Fruit. But Luffy is passively rubber at all times. Even when Luffy is tired, he is rubber. When Luffy is underwater, he is still rubber. When Luffy is asleep, he is still rubber without activating it, which basically confirms that the only Devil Fruits that are passively their Devil Fruit at all times are Logia and God Zoans. This idea becomes even more credible once you consider that the possibility that Blackbeard may have a Mythical God Zoan. There's been many theories on Blackbeard's original Devil Fruit being the main cause of his weird body composition, but we've never seen him activate whatever Zoan Devil Fruit he may have. So it's very likely that he's using the passive body of his God Zoan. But where am I going with this, and how does this relate to Brook? You see, I've mentioned before, Brook's biology is an impossibility, and those impossibilities I hypothesize are due to him having the passive body of a Mythical God Zoan. It's very likely that whatever god Brook's Devil Fruit is modeled after has a skeleton as its original body. But okay, this is all speculation, right? Because none of this is confirmed. Besides, the best counter argument for this is that we should simply suspend our disbelief for the impossible nature of Brook's body and just chalk it all up to anime science, right? Wrong. You see, Oda has given us a direct clue that Brook's body does indeed break biological science on purpose. And the clue is hidden right on Brook's head. The clue is Brook's afro. Let's go back to chapter 443, where Zoro says something interesting about Brook's afro. He says, "I've never seen a skeleton with hair," to which Brook comedically replied, "I had very strong follicles." Now, I want you to understand how packed this dialogue here is. First, let's take a deeper dive into what Zoro is saying. The basis behind what Zoro is saying is that when you die and your body decays, so do your organs, including your hair. So it would be literally impossible for a skeleton who has been dead for decades to have hair at all, let alone a full afro. And again, sure, you may have the urge to think, man, this is anime, this is One Piece, it shouldn't make any sense. Why are you applying real world logic and biological science to a fictional series? Well, I must remind you that it's not me adding in biological science out of thin air. It's Oda who includes biological science by speaking of follicles. But really, think about it. What is a hair follicle? A hair follicle is a tube-like structure that surrounds a strand of hair. Hair follicles exist in the top layers of your skin. Now, what does this mean? If hair follicles form on the top layers of your skin, then if you don't have any skin, you don't have any hair follicle. Brook is a skeleton. He has absolutely no skin whatsoever. So he also wouldn't have any hair follicles to grow any hair out of either. Which means Oda is literally telling us with this dialogue that the existence of Brook's hair is biologically impossible on purpose. And he gives us the scientific terms to come to this conclusion ourselves by mentioning follicles. It couldn't be any clearer. Brook's afro is a characteristic of his devil rather than his own hair. Okay, we're getting closer and closer towards understanding Brook's true devil fruit. So we understand Brook's devil fruit is a mythical Zoan with the body of a skeleton, and strangely enough has a full afro. The skeleton, I believe, implies that it seems to be a god of death of some culture, but there are multiple gods of death from multiple cultural mythologies who resemble a skeleton. But what gives us more insight on what specific culture Brook's devil fruit comes from is the afro. And we all know which culture the afro came from: Black and African culture. But do African people have a collective spirituality that believes in a god of death? Well, not collectively, but contrary to popular belief, there are some parts in Africa that have a collective and historical religion called Vodou. The origin of Vodou is West Africa in countries like Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Nigeria. But current iterations of this spirituality can be found in the Americas, in the Caribbean island of Haiti and Louisiana. All this leads me to conclude that Brook's god of death is modeled after an African Vodou deity, especially considering that the history of the afro can be traced back to tribal Africa, where hair was used to define roles, hierarchy, and status. And it has survived into the Americas, and so has the African spirituality in a few places. I know what you're thinking. Is it possible that Oda would be this knowledgeable on Vodou spirituality, or am I reaching here? Well, to think otherwise would be greatly underestimating how much of a historian Oda truly is. Oda has written One Piece as a story that encompasses all sorts of influences of different cultures and spiritualities. We have influences of Hinduism through Zoro's Ashura, Buddhism with Sengoku's Buddha fruit, Greek mythology with Nami's Zeus, Norse mythology with Loki from Elbaf. The list goes on and on. Let me know in the comments what more spiritualities and religious beliefs you've seen in One Piece, but it's clear that Oda is very well versed in all cultural beliefs, and it's not far-fetched that he would be knowledgeable in traditional West African and Haitian Vodou mythology, especially when you consider that Oda has Hawkins in the story, and Hawkins use Vodou dolls. And if we have Hawkins' devil fruit, which already is inspired by Vodou, why wouldn't we have another devil fruit which is inspired by Vodou as well? I honestly appreciate how thorough and consistent Oda is when it comes to representing every culture in his story. It's a narrative element that makes One Piece a truly immersive story, since it seems like a replication of the real world. It truly gives a new meaning to the quote, "The One Piece is real." It feels incredibly good to know that you can read a story from someone originating all the way from Japan that can accurately depict and represent your respective culture so well. On that note, I want to highlight for a second how tapped in Oda is to African history and Black history overall, especially when you look at Arlong's depiction in the One Piece live action and the emphasis he puts on the Black plight when it comes to racism, slavery, and oppression.
They fear our power, so they bound us with chains. They loathe our presence, so they banned us from their cities. But we broke those chains.
These are themes often misrepresented in anime, and when some artists try to represent us, it's often a butchering of the truth of Black history. Speaking of the truth of Black history, let's go back to analyzing the importance of Brook's afro. Brook's afro has told us more than enough about the true nature of his devil fruit, but can we accurately depict the true name of his devil fruit? If he is a mythical god Zoan modeled after a historically Black and African spirituality, then which god could it be? Well, look no further than the most popularly depicted Vodou spirit in popular media, Baon Samedi. This name won't ring a bell on first mention, but it will once I mention many ways he's been popularly depicted. Baon Samedi is a deity that has been depicted in movies like Princess and the Frog. He is the inspiration behind Facilier, commonly known as the Shadow Man, who is the main antagonist of Disney's 2009 animated feature film, The Princess and the Frog. He's depicted as an evil, smooth-talking voodoo witch doctor who plots to rule New Orleans with the help from his friends on the other side. Baon Samdi also appears in popular games such as Smite, popular movies such as James Bond, and popular television shows such as Supernatural and American God. It's evident that Baon Samdi is not an obscure figure in popular media. In fact, he is the main representation for the Vodou spirituality around the world. So Oda using him as a basis for Brook's Devil Fruit is all the more likely. What's especially interesting is the many similarities Baon Samdi has to Brook. Baon Samdi is usually depicted with a top hat, black tailcoat, dark glasses, and he is usually depicted as a skeleton. Now, does that sound familiar? A skeleton with a top hat, tailcoat, and dark glasses. That is literally Brook's whole design. But that's not all. The similarities get freakishly more identical. Baon Samdi is also the spirit of resurrection. And what does Brook claim his Devil Fruit to be? A resurrection fruit. But wait, there's more similarities. One of Baon Samdi's biggest roles in Vodou is to guard the cemetery so that departed souls don't cross the barrier of life and death and turn into zombies. Does that sound familiar? Does Thriller Bark's zombies ring any bells? In Thriller Bark, we are introduced to Brook and we find out that his main goal is to purge the zombies of Thriller Bark in an effort to retrieve his shadow. Just like Baon Samdi, Brook was portrayed as a guardian of the barrier of life and death, whose role is to prevent the rise of zombies. The similarities are way too strong to deny. Brook has eaten a devil fruit that is inspired by the Vodou spirit Baon Samdi. But if you want to hear more lore on Baon, I have links in the video for people on YouTube who talk about him extensively and may be able to provide better insight than me. But okay, what does this all mean and how does this fit into Egghead Island and the defeat of Saturn? Well, Baon Samdi is a deity that guards the barrier of life and death. His role of protecting the cemetery and purging zombies represents his role to not allow a disturbance between life and death. And Saturn's existence is a disturbance because immortality does not allow the natural cycle of life and death. An immortal soul is cheating the rules of the underworld. And when that happens, the Baon of Death, Baon Samdi, must rectify this disorder. See, Brook's Devil Fruit may have the ability to temporarily reverse Saturn's immortality so that the Straw Hats have a chance to defeat him for good. In fact, there's much more foreshadowing that suggests that Brook is the biggest weakness to Saturn. It was revealed in the latest chapters of One Piece that Saturn has some sort of mythical spider demon fruit. It's very interesting that Saturn is a spider because Brook has quite a history with fighting against spiders in the story. Brook's first ever fight displayed in the story was actually with a spider in Thriller Bark. In chapter 450, Brook enters the fight along Frankie and Robin to help them defeat a spider monkey. This is also the first time in Thriller Bark where we learn of the weakness of the zombies being salt with Brook's help. We were not able to defeat the zombie spider because they were basically immortal due to Moria's shadow. So when Brook defeats the spider monkey and purges the shadow from it, this was essentially the first time we saw the defeat of an immortal creature, which happened to be a spider like Saturn. This foreshadowing goes even deeper with Brook's most recent fight in Wano. In chapter 1020, Brook helps defeat a spider once again against Black Maria. To help Robin against Black Maria, Brook separated his soul from his body and uses his cold soul technique to freeze Black Maria's weapon called Wanyuru. Now, this is especially important because Wanyuru is actually a Japanese yokai spirit depicted as a giant head trapped in a fiery will, just as depicted in the anime. Now, this is very, very important because it basically confirms that Brook is the first character to ever defeat a yokai in the whole story. And the fact that Saturn is a yokai is especially interesting. See, in both cases of Brook fighting a spider, he exposes and exploits their weakness. Against the spider monkey, he negated his immortality. Against Black Maria, he defeated her weapon, who happened to be modeled after a yokai. Now, Saturn seems to be a spider yokai who is also immortal, and according to all the foreshadowing, Brook will play a huge role in defeating him. Now, how he will defeat Saturn is more just fun speculation. The most likely way I can see him doing so is disrupting Saturn's dark magic circle, especially since Brook has been connected with dark magic circles before, as I've mentioned. Baon Samdi also specializes in negating black magic, so if Brook awakened his Devil Fruit, he may be able to use this against Saturn. It would also be really cool if Brook can make his own magic circles as well that enhances his own abilities. The idea of Brook using voodoo magic is honestly so overpowered, but I think Brook deserves this level of power because he is overdue for an awesome power-up. You see, our beloved Soul King is not just another forgotten character. He is the most important character towards defeating the biggest threat in front of us right now, Saint J. Garcia Saturn. And he is likely the biggest threat toward defeating all of the Gorosei, since they all likely are immortal. So don't lose hope, Brook fans. Oda has not forgotten about Brook. In the latest chapters, his importance get even re-emphasized. In chapter 1078, Brook prepares to load up an attack called Abade. And for those who don't know, Abade is a poem or a piece of music appropriate to the dawn or early morning, which is a direct homage to Brook being one of the most important Straw Hats to bring about the dawn in the One Piece world. And he would do so with his Mythical Zoan Fruit modeled after the Vodou god of life and death, Baron Samedi. And that's the theory, guys. Hope you enjoyed watching and listening, and like always, like and subscribe to look forward to the most interesting One Piece theories on YouTube. Middleway out.